All right, I think we can get started. It is already the time. So welcome to this IA MSDTC webinar today. And my name is Juju, and this year Dr. Speckle and I we are co-hosting the webinar series for the MSDTC. I am from North Carolina State University, and Dr. Speckle, he's affiliated with Arbor Wune, as well as Ligt University, Amsterdam. For today, it is our honor to have Dr. Maikala to give us a presentation titled "What the Frontline Thinks About the Technology for MSD Prevention and Why It Matters." Dr. Maikala, he is currently a subject matter expert and program technical consultant of the National Safety Council MSD Solution Lab. He is also served as editor-in-chief of Ergonomics by Design. Previously, he worked as a senior injury prevention and ergonomics program specialist at Providence Regional Medical Center in Washington State, where he taught and trained hospital staff and safe patient handling and mobility. And before that, he spent many years in the Center for Physical Ergonomics, Liberty Mutual Research Institute for Safety. He received his doctorate degree in rehabilitation science from the University of Alberta, Canada, as well as master's degree in industrial engineering with special emphasis on ergonomics and safety engineering from West Virginia University. All right, with that said, I think Dr. Maikala, you can take over the presentation, the speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Shu. Thanks for this honor. Thank you, Erwin, as well, both of you, for bringing me to be part of this tech series or MSD technical group of IEA. Again, my name is Maikala. As I said, I was actually colleague of Shu when he was at Liberty Mutual Research Institute for Safety. So, all right. So I'll do my best to be interactive. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. So I will do my best to answer. Again, when this MSD Solutions Lab started 5 years back at NSC, whereas National Safety Council is a 100-plus-year-old organization. It's a nonprofit in the US organization, 113 years to be precise. It's more of a safety advocacy group, but ergonomics has been new in a way to a National Safety Council. And also this lab, what is also MSD Solutions Lab is in the cloud, in the sense we work from different places. We are all work for remote, so we don't have a physical lab per se. Okay. So anyway, when we started this journey in ergonomics, we created this home where culture that values worker health safety, this number one you see on the down, is the foundation. You can create whatever you want. If you don't have that culture to take care of the workers' health and safety, then it's going to fail. So you need to have a strong culture if you want to develop a musculoskeletal disorder prevention program. Obviously, the leadership commitment is very important. Okay, without their support, you will not succeed. Having said that, the number three, the worker engagement, because they are the experts on the work. So can we should include them, but are we including them? Okay, so that's one of the things I'm going to talk about. And again, all this foundation, we have this ergonomics, which we know that, we wanted to take care of the worker by modifying the job, right? And whereas, yes, all the jobs can be redesigned. So what you do is, what happens if a worker ends up with an injury? Can we take care of the medical management side? Can we bring the worker to the return to work aspect of it? If what's the carpal tunnel syndrome, do you have the treatment strategies? So that's what we look into the medical management. So we have been developing all these resources. So that's the reason I'm kind of mentioning that as our home. And we do have some also in terms of the end of the day, we are looking at the worker resiliency and also the well-being. Okay, so this is how we developed our MSD Solutions Lab program in the last 5 years. Okay, so part of that, what we did was we did an employer survey, not employee, but employer survey, whether are they showing any interest in addressing the musculoskeletal disorders. They know that what's happened based on the workers' comp data. They know that the worker is being hurt, but are you taking that initiative? Okay, in in terms of the addressing injuries. So that was the one we started, worker survey. Okay, and that's how we created this pledge. This pledge is about employer taking that, pledge that, okay, we are going to improve our workplace safety. We are going to reduce the MSD risks. And we wanted to enhance the well-being. So we have around more than 300 organizations. They took that pledge. Okay. But the question is, I mean, if you're part of any industry, please look into this. That's the reason I put a QR code, and you will see that, if you want to join this organization, please let me know. Again, so part of that, right, home. So yes, we did an employer survey. We are continuously doing it, every year. But the question comes is, are we hearing from the front line? Are we concerned about the front line? So they need to have the voice. Are we listening to them? So that's how we developed a frontline worker survey. Okay, so that was the precursor for this technology survey. We did the frontline worker survey in terms of what their feedback is with respect to musculoskeletal disorders. And this is the second one. So the motivation for this whole thing is, we know that participatory ergonomics matters, right? So it's a collaborative approach to ergonomics that includes workers, supervisors, all the stakeholders, okay, in identifying the areas where improvement is needed, okay, and and designing and implementing solutions with being getting the workers involved. So that's participatory economics. And as you know, the one of the best articles on this is from Dr. Burgess Limerick from Australia, who looked into the very systematic approach in terms of how it can be used, right? Participatory ergonomics. So, but we say that workers are knowledgeable, right? Workers are the most knowledgeable experts about their physical demands and the risks of their own work. But are we listening to them? And shared authority. What it says is workers should participate in the decisions about the technology selection, program design, and governance. Not just, hey, we bought this technology, we are going to implement it. That's not going to work. So the, again, based on my own experience, I worked in the healthcare industry for 7 years. We have seen a lot of patient handling devices being bought without even considering the frontline staff. What's going to happen is it ends collecting dust. So they'll be all in that room. People don't have the approach. How do you take it? What is the training? And what is the return on investment? Nothing. You just buy a new shiny object, thinking that hey, can we use it? Maybe we can use it, but are they willing to use it? The front line. So that is the one which is the motivation for this also. Continuous dialogue. Participation should be ongoing. It shouldn't be on. Hey, we did the assessment of this. Okay, this computer vision tool, great tool. We did the assessment. Everybody likes it. Let's implement in all these different plants or different workplaces. Is it going to work? So again, the way I look at participatory ergonomics is, it's design the interventions with the workers, not for them. Okay, so that means you're treating a frontline expertise as an indispensable input into risk identification, solution development, technology selection, and program evaluation. If you want to succeed a participatory approach program, we should go that approach. That's my biased view. Okay. Again, it's not this participatory approach is not a consultation exercise. It's a structural commitment to treat workers' expertise as a indispensable input. Not just, yeah, let's bring the workers. And it's not just a namesake thing. Okay. So that's how we wanted to approach, because end of the day, as you know, that frontline workers do matter, because whatever we are doing, whatever risk we are addressing towards taking care of the workers. Okay. So this was the previous study with the report. I have a QR code for this in the later, but as I said, we did a frontline worker survey looking at various aspects of frontline workers. But if you look at this example, right, this graph from that previous report we did it shows how comfortable different groups of workers are, in using the technology. Okay, so if you're looking at the 67% overall, they were comfortable. Just within the 18 to 40-year group, 78% of them are comfortable in using the technology. Okay, and so this is, and whereas that is 67% of all workers. So it means that 1 in 3 workers are not comfortable. Okay, so that means there is a gap when the technology adoption is being considered as a solution. Think about that. Okay, and again, 18 to 40-year-olds, at 75% of this, younger workers are comfortable, but still notably below the technology, professional groups. If you look at the 89% here, okay. Again, so that's a good sign too. In terms of the tenure of the workers, right? 6 to 9 or 10 years tenure, at 79%. So workers with a mid-range tenure typically are reasonably comfortable, suggesting that some workplace experience helps to build that confidence with the technology tools. Okay. So again, though this particular tenure group still falls below the 89%, if you look at it, right? Technology and science professionals who are comfortable. Okay. So again, the licensed professionals, what we're talking about is the typical the tech professional groups, welding, you name it, all the people the carpentry, all these particular groups were comfortable, are they? So that is actually a surprising 87%. They show that they are comfortable in using the tech. So it suggests that the conflict isn't about comfort with technology itself, but about a broader job displacement fears, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. So again, this particular graph is based on the previous study we did. Okay. So now, what we did was, for this particular report we did, or for this particular presentation, what we considered was emerging technology. Okay, so you have wearable sensors. There's so much literature on it: exoskeletons, cobots, computer vision, extended reality, digital twins. Okay, so these are the technologies. So the methodology was that we conducted a survey among 405 non-managerial workers, okay, across the industries who have experience using this technology in their current role. Again, these 405 frontline workers have experience in using that particular technology. So the industries we consider are manufacturing, construction, healthcare, transportation, warehousing, and others. We look at the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics data, and then we kind of concentrated on the top 10 risk industries. Okay. So it was an online survey. We used a third party to conduct this survey. And the eligibility was they must have used the MSD prevention technology in the current role, the one I showed in the previous slide. Again, they have to be non-managerial job role. They should be at least 18 plus years. Okay. And unfortunately, we did only in the US. Okay. The survey was 33 items, and also we collected some demographics. Again, the items were, Likert scale, some of them multiple choice, some of them are open-ended. Okay. So we used, statistical analysis to take care of the data. Okay. Again, the survey covered general MSD risks and symptoms. What are the perceived benefits and the concerns about technology? And what's the perceived impact on the well-being, job satisfaction, all which come under participatory ergonomics. Okay. Again, we used a third-party vendor for this. So look at the demographics here for a minute. So you have, 53% male, the workers, and we have the 47% female. The age group, you look at the 30 to 39 age group, or the highest, 35%. We have the education. Again, we have even frontline workers who have a bachelor's or more, in terms of their competency. And you have the job tenure. Interestingly, 38% of them have at least 3 to 5 years of experience in their current work. Okay. In terms of ethnicity, you have 88% non-Hispanic or Latinos, and you have 10%, 12% or Hispanic and Latinos. Okay. In terms of the race, you have 56% white and 36% Black and African American. Yeah. So again, so you look at also the industries. We have healthcare and social assistance are at least the highest in terms of the 20%. So what I'm trying to say is while the sample reflects diversity across several dimensions, it's worth noting that, a little bit of over half of the respondents were white and English speaking. Okay. So this is a convenient sample, which we kind of, it implies a bias. You need to keep that in mind. Okay. Because we did not consider not only again, region, different aspects of it other than, yes, the good percentage is white and good percent of the workers is English speaking. All right. So in terms of the breakdown, you look at that 405, the sample size was 405, right? So each respondent was asked to identify the technology they had the most experience in their current role. Okay. So while some items were designed to capture what's the attitude, general attitude towards technology, these respondents were also asked specifically about the technology they had the most experience with. Okay. So if you look at the last here, right, the 0%, the two respondents selected other, and those are actually, they have this experience with the patient handling devices. They are from the healthcare. Okay. So these respondents were included in the overall analysis, but they were excluded from the analysis that compared across the specific technology types. Because as you've seen, we did not include the emerging, the patient handling devices as emerging tech per se. Okay. Again, we do have limitations in terms of the studies. So, but the majority, if you look at again on the left, the wearable sensors, a lot of people use wearable sensors. I'm sure based on your literature, you might say that, hey, that is actually pretty reasonable. Computer vision, again, it's gone up and it's going to go high with so much, research being done in that. But 96 people responded, that, yes, they use computer vision. Exoskeletons around 17%, and the rest of that is extended, XR versus robots and the digital twins. Very small sample size of people use digital twins. Okay, so let's look at the risk perceptions and the musculoskeletal burden. Okay, on the you have three. That is, what is your concern about developing an injury? Do you have concern about developing an injury in the current role on the leftmost? This middle is the job tasks that result in physical discomfort. Do you agree or not? And also the job tasks that cause mental stress. Okay. So if you look at it, right, if you add this top, 77% of these respondents said that they are at least moderately concerned about developing an injury in their current role. So here, if you add 33, 25, and 19, okay, at 77%, are at least moderately concerned about developing an injury in their current role. Okay. And if you add here, that is the job tasks result in physical discomfort, 45 plus 17, 62% agreed that their tasks result in physical discomfort. Okay. And if you look at the job task that cause mental stress, 64%, again, you add 21% and the 43%. 64% said that their job causes mental stress. So again, if you look at the bottom graph here, the respondents were asked specifically about the signs and symptoms of their MSDs. Okay. 70%, if you look at it, had, at least they experienced symptoms in the current role. And out of that, 64% missed work as a result. Okay, here in the in the extreme side. Okay. And the most commonly affected body parts, as you know, typically back, and of course, the wrist and hands came second, and you have the knees and of course shoulders. Okay. So what this particular graph says is that, these workers in this sample of 405, they are not viewing technology solutions from a neutral starting point, right? Because they're already carrying significant physical and psychological burden with respect to work. So let's look at the, before I present in depth of perceptions of technology, this is the elephant in the room per se. You have the privacy, trust, and technology concern. This is a huge thing nowadays. Yes, you can bring all these AI tools and ask them to, use it in their workplace, but how are they comfortable? Are they comfortable? So the question was, I have concerns about the privacy of my data when using new technologies at work. Look at these results here on the left side. Okay. These top two, if you add 12% and 34%, 46% express some concern about data privacy. Okay. Whereas here, if you look at on the right side, right, 43% had concerns about AI or technology influencing how they conduct their work. Okay. Education level was a significant predictor. The more educated workers tend to express stronger concerns on both dimensions. Okay, that's what we have seen. Interesting, nowadays, if you look at the graduations, wherever people are all the speakers, keynote people who are speaking at the graduations, whenever people are mentioning AI, there's a huge amount of what you call disappointment from the young graduates. So you see that, the higher the education, they are worried about not only the AI privacy and AI concerns. If you ask a typical graduate, they're concerned about their jobs. Okay. I don't want to go beyond that because that's a whole different topic. But interestingly, look at this, 80% of them were comfortable raising concerns to their leadership. That's a very good sign of psychological safety we talk about in industries. Okay. So especially when, leadership is actually acting on the feedback they receive. Okay. So that's a very good, the question I have is that, yes, concern about technology is prevalent, but about 80% of these respondents feel comfortable in talking to their leadership. So a question, if I'm not sure how many, I can't see in the audience here, what attitudes you commonly see among the frontline workers regarding technology? Do we have any in the audience who are working in the industry? Do you want to just talk about it just for a minute? What attitudes you commonly see among the frontline workers regarding technology? Do you see this trust and transparency comes under as part of your conversation? Anybody is interested in sharing their opinion from the attendees? Erwin, Shu, do we see anyone?
No, I don't see any hands raised or something like that.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, but typically they will have some questions at the end of the talk.
No worries. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So, the perceived impact of the technology, right? So on the left, you see that, on the impact of technology on the MSD signs and symptoms. Okay, this is a pretty busy graph here. With respect to wearable sensors, you have 7%, so that they increase MSD signs symptoms. Their awareness with respect to the using the technology. So again, the question is that respondents that they experience MSD signs and symptoms were asked whether they thought that technology increased or decreased the signs and symptoms they experienced, okay, or potentially increased in some body parts or decreased in others. Okay, so if you look at the vast majority, right, across all the technology types, reported that the technology either had no impact or decreased MSD signs and symptoms. So if you look at the green one here, right, there's no impact, right? And you see a good chunk also decrease in the signs and symptoms that are experienced when they use this impact of technology. Okay, so it might be intuitive that technologies that provide direct physical assistance. So, for example, sorry if I can. Okay, did I go into that? Sorry. What I mean to say that yes, I apologize. I think I might be going too fast here. My keyboard here. So what I'm saying is that you have these exoskeletons, right? Robots or cobots. The frontline folks, the exos and the cobots, they provide direct physical assistance, right? So they were most likely to be perceived as decreasing the signs and symptoms. Okay, whereas this computer vision and the wearable sensors, they just give you, it's just a risk assessment tool. Okay, they were most commonly perceived as having no impact. Again, because you're just using a computer vision tool saying that, hey, this risk is in red zone, risk is in the yellow zone. So there is a difference in it, okay? Because they generate the sensor data, wearable sensors or computer vision, they generate the data and raise awareness. But if you don't translate that data into actual changes to work, right? Workers don't feel any difference. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say from this particular graph. Let's see the agreement, the perceived impact of technology on agreement that technologies led to less concerns around developing an injury. Good sign, if you look at it, right? 72% for wearable sensors. All are pretty good. They do agree that, the technologies lead to less concern around developing an injury. Okay, so that's a good sign. So continuing that perceived impact on technology, on the awareness of ergonomics risk factors. Okay, so even if these particular technologies don't directly reduce the symptoms, they do have a meaningful impact in different dimensions. You have the ergonomic awareness. So we wanted to see what happens. What do they perceive? What do they perceive? So if you look at it, right, 96% of the exoskeletons users said that those users who use that 90%, the exoskeleton users, they said 96% that that technology increased their awareness of their risk factors. Highest of any technology, if you look at it here, right? So wearable sensors came in second at 91%, whereas computer vision and the extended reality came at 84 to 85%. If you're looking at the posture, do these technologies improve the posture? Exoskeletons again led by 81%, reporting improved posture, whereas wearable sensors were close to 77%. Again, have you seen similar reactions in your organizations? Please think about it, and maybe we can talk that after my presentation. Again, exoskeletons or the cobots or robots, which actually take care of their physical hazard versus reducing that risk, versus these sensors, wearable sensors and computer vision, I would totally give a different picture. Okay. Again, continuing on the perceived impact of the technology on mental stress. Okay. Again, there's so much being studied, so many are worried about what's happening with this. So the majority, if you look at it, right, the majority reported reduce or neutral effects on mental stress. If you look at it on the left side. Okay. So qualitative responses reveal that the mental stress reduction mechanism varies by technology. So for wearable sensors and computer vision, workers reported that, hey, having the technology watch for them reduced anxiety. They didn't have to constantly monitor their own movement patterns. Okay. Whereas for exoskeletons and robots, the physical relief translated directly into lower cognitive and emotional burden. So in my view, that's a pretty important finding. Look at the job satisfaction here. Okay. Every technology type showed it 70% or more of users reported improvement. So that's a pretty good sign. They feel that, that technology improves. Technology is a pretty good measure. So again, have you seen this kind of results or perceptions in your own workplace? Excuse me. So what it tells you is the power of worker participation. Because as you know, one of the most, so the participatory approach is that collaborative environments in technology implementation. I can't stress that enough. If you look at responses on the training, okay, and involvement, the data is, 85% received adequate training. That's a huge thing, right? That helps them to appreciate, right, the concerns they have with respect to technology. And 83% of them had opportunities to practice and provide feedback. Again, huge positive thing about from this survey. Interestingly, only 53% felt involved in technology decision making. So there is a huge gap in terms of practitioners or the industry folks to, take care of that. Yes, you can create a technology, the solution providers say that, oh, wow, we created this technology. But if you don't include the usability studies or, user feedback, then it's going to sit and collect the dust. Okay. Again, in our study, every technology, across every technology type, the worker participation was consistently and significantly correlated with positive outcomes. Okay. So again, if you look at the data here, there is a positive reduced injury concerns, improved postural quality, so lower perceived mental stress. Again, the greater ergonomic risk awareness. They got higher overall job satisfaction. Unfortunately, women were less involved in decision making. Okay, because again, this is very important. And also, we talk about mental stress. So that's again, this is at least, this is one of the powerful findings of our survey. Okay. So please think about it. Do you see the same at your workplace? So the highlights of this particular study, looking at the wearable sensors. Sorry, I think, wearable sensors. You have 94% of them, yes, they do have awareness of that. 76% they said that, they improved posture. And you see that on the reduces stress by monitoring movement. So the workers don't have to worry, Of course, there are some distractions were noted with respect to wearable sensors. Let's go on to the right side, computer vision. Again, that helped in terms of their ergonomics awareness, posture, especially, and the 70% improved posture. So the benefits are tied to reduced stress and observation, but there is a concern about accuracy and privacy. Exoskeletons, again, 96% of them that helped their awareness. 80% improved their posture because of using exoskeletons, and 54% had decrease in symptoms. Again, so this is the physical relief, especially from the backs and knees, and maybe the highest ergonomics awareness in terms of the technologies. Let's go to the robots and cobots. 50% reported that, they have decreased symptoms. 85% of them mentioned that, they had a decrease in injury concerns. And as I again said, like exoskeletons, they're best for removing the physical burden. Of course, you have all this, with respect to this robots and cobots, Then you have the job control issue, the pace, the pressure, and the job security issue as well. They were brought in. Looking at the extended reality, AR, augmented, or virtual, 85% of them responded that helps them in terms of the ergonomics awareness. Help them in terms of the 72% felt that they had improved posture because of that. Okay. Again, it was a strong training and simulation value. They recognized it, but a learning curve in terms of when you're using that particular technology can be a barrier. The last one, the digital twins, only 14 people, as I said before, you have seen limited sample. I'm sure in a couple of years, this will be a huge in terms of the technology growth and also usability at the work. So 93% of them out of those 14 people said that, it definitely helps in terms of their ergonomics awareness. They felt that's a very good, the injury concern has been reduced by, at least by 71% of them felt that it can reduce the injuries. Okay. So again, this is a very good in terms of the findings. Just an example of what the workers said. We also looked at it, some of the, as I said, there are some open-end questions. They said, if you're looking at the wearable sensor, right, it tells me where my pain comes from. So I don't need to be stressed anymore. Okay. Whereas if you're looking at, again, I feel more comfortable and confident in completing my job. This is again with respect to that particular wearable, which helps alleviate mental stress. But I'm also afraid of eventually being replaced by robots, which increases my mental stress. So it's pretty interesting comment. With respect to exoskeletons, the fact that they make your posture more firm and comfortable. I don't feel like I'm in immense pain staying in one position or lifting objects that are heavy or having to bend down multiple times a day, constantly over and over. So these are pretty good, So what are the key takeaways? If I look, if I can summarize this particular one. Match the technology to the goal. Okay, we know that exoskeletons or robots reduce the physical load. So if you are looking at the technology for certain particular tasks, please look into the efficiency of these particular tools. Wearables or computer vision, identify the risk and guide the intervention, okay? Because they are kind of a risk assessment tools, right? The XRs or digital twins, use it for training, simulation, proactive design. You know the risk, so why don't you look into engineering of the hazard by using this particular, very new technology. Excuse me. Second one is building the trust, not for surveillance. Again, if you look at the literature, even I think Europe is way ahead in terms of putting guardrails in terms of the AI. Frame the technology as a worker benefit, not a productivity monitor. Okay. It's not that you guys don't know, but I'm just saying that, we felt that comes from that particular data, from our data. Be transparent. Data should be for safety improvement, not to discipline, okay, the worker. Allow the opt-out options, minimize the intrusive monitoring. Embed worker voice in adoption, again, co-design the pilots, bring the workers before you buy a technology, bring the workers, talk to them, and also, do a pilot before you buy this shiny object, okay? And provide, offer clear channels for feedback and act on that input. Provide access to individual data whenever possible, okay? And the measure well-being as a return on investment, track the job satisfaction alongside the injury metrics. Yes, you're collecting the data in terms of the physical burden, but also look at the psychological factors as well, okay? How does this make a worker's day easier? Always ask, how does this particular technology makes a worker's day easier, okay? Automating the demand tasks, reducing the cognitive load, Show them some case studies, use cases, show them. Not just, what do you call, from the technology providers. Obviously, they'll have their own way of looking at the user, how their technology can be useful. But look at, ask different industries. If you have if you are working in a industry A, but if the industry B is using, just get some feedback from it. Again, what are the future research directions? Technology specific study designs, look into the, with the tailored measurement tools. Okay. So we need to have that, and recruiting from organizations where tech use is independently verified. Again, I can't stress that enough. If you really want a good unbiased report on surgical technology, go for that. And also more diverse and the representative sample, including non-English speakers. Definitely that will help. Okay. Especially if you're in a country where there is, a multilingual options, then you need to look at that option as well. Again, this is a research kind of a longitudinal designs. Look into longitudinal approaches studies, to examine the sustained adaptation and effectiveness. There are only few studies, if you look at, especially in the exoskeleton world, look at that long times of adoption. Because again, based on my own experience in the healthcare, you get this technology, sometimes you use this technology, but you don't sustain afterwards. You get bored, or you think that, oh, it's taking too much time, and they just keep collecting dust again. Okay. Explore the gender gaps, gender or sex gaps in technology decision making in participation. Okay. So these are the, please go into our website if you can, and these are free. You just, you can download these reports, one on the prevention technology, and one is the perspectives on from frontline workers. Okay. And this is we also do spotlights, 1-2 pages spotlights. If you want that, go on the left side, there's a QR code. MSD Solutions Commons is like a bank or information where you can find resources. If your industry wants to share some resources, you're more than welcome to keep it in this part of that. And there's one more, I just want to thank you for your time here. But if you are interested, we have a webinar coming up on June 23rd. And this is celebrating our 5 years of this MSD Solutions Lab, or the successes and what we did in the last 5 years. And also we have a NSC Safety Congress, which is in September. More than 10,000 people show up. It's a huge gathering. So if you're looking into safety, technology, all that, NSC, our own organization, does it. Okay. Again, thank you for your time. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide and see if you have anybody who wants to chat or.
Yes, I do have a question. In my work as a practicing ergonomist, but also in my research, I sometimes find, for example, that the acceptance of exoskeletons is low, even though they've been involved in which one they think might be the most beneficial for them. And strangely enough, in one of my studies, we asked the participants, would you advise your colleague to use one? And they predominantly answered yes. And then we asked them, will you be using one? And then they said no. So they thought that it was a good solution, but for someone else. Have you encountered that in your practice?
It's very interesting. In the beginning of exoskeletons, there was a theory that yes, they are using the technology. My other worker A, is using the technology, but you know what? People have this assumption that, oh, that person is weak, or that person is a female. That's why she is using the exoskeleton. This became a very so-called macho thing, or hey, only weaker people use it, or something. Oh, you need assistance. I can lift 35 pounds without any problem. Versus, oh, you need various. So that kind of stuff is, as we have seen that too. Even in patient handling, which I worked in for 7 years, where some people want to use the technology. There is a reason for it. As you know, there are so many injuries. in terms of even if you calculate the biomechanical forces, you just can't handle a unstable patient or even a patient who is on the board, right? So it's just it's a struggle. It's a struggle. Again, perceptions are pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, this organization, which is a technical organization, we had basically both. We had what
Mhm.
you just told us, but also others who thought, yeah, this is, I'm an early adapter. This is technology, and technology is cool. Um, so yeah, depending on the character, some of them accept it, and others do not. But yeah.
Thank you, Erwin. I think there is a question in the chat I was seeing.
Yeah, from
I'm not
Ajit.
sure
Yeah.
how to implement this in healthcare industry. Which one you're talking about, Archit? Which one to implement? Which technology are you talking? Exoskeletons?
We cannot hear you, Ajit.
No, you are in physical therapy. I understand, my friend, but tell me which technology are you interested? I want to answer your question, but what do you mean by how to implement this? What is this? Can you explain to me what this is? Exoskeletons. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say. Well, exoskeletons, people are if you look at it, there are so many people have been using this. There are some studies from Purdue. I think there are from studies from Clemson, also from University of Wisconsin, from Jackie Chow studies. Well, exoskeletons, again, you need to, first of all, the healthcare issue is lot of hygiene issues, personal hygiene issues. You need to have not only donning and doffing the exoskeletons, but you need to have that, sterilization process. You can't just ask one person to take it and wipe it. So that's one of the reasons there is a limitation in terms of, people using it. But as long as you have a proper protocol, in terms of using that particular technology, showing the benefits, how much time it takes to don, how much time it takes to doff. Say, for example, you got the exoskeleton, you're trying to lift the patient from the bed. What if the patient grabs those exoskeletons? Okay, all these things matter. So you need to have a proper education for the healthcare worker. So I hope I answered your question, Archit. Thank you. I tried when I was in the healthcare industry, but I couldn't succeed. For there's a different reason for exoskeleton. I mean, they were saying, well, we don't have time. There are so many factors come into picture. We have been doing this like this for a while, uh, so yeah. I mean, the other question is, I too need to know about how we can implement digital twins to prevent MSDs among nurses. Well, I mean, there are some technologies. I don't want to say which technology, but there are some digital, but still, if you look at the literature, digital twins are very popular in the manufacturing industries, yet to be implemented in the healthcare side of it, at least to my knowledge. Yes, digital twins are used in the surgery side in the sense that if you are explaining certain technology in terms of the surgery, how to do the surgery and all that stuff, I've seen some. But what I'm trying to say is if you're trying to look at the nurses and preventing these MSDs, I don't think I've seen, at least to my knowledge. But in manufacturing, we have seen a lot, at least. If you can just Google it, you'll find it. Okay. Any more questions from audience?
Well, actually, I do have a question.
Yes, sure.
So I have a question. I think it is more related to the perspective of employers. So in the past, when we talk with the employers, when we introduce different new technologies like computer vision, wearable sensors, or exoskeleton, so their question would be how much this can save me the cost associated with injuries. So most of the studies, let's say exoskeleton, most of them, they are like cross-sectional studies. So I am going to run an experiment in my lab. I'm going to apply biomechanical models, and I'm going to calculate how much force and moment with or and without exoskeleton inside our body, around the lower back, around the shoulder. But they are new technologies, so very rarely would we see like longitudinal studies. So we don't know how much a new technology can really reduce the rate of injury over, let's say, 5 years, 10 years. So because of that, when we talk with employers, they often ask us, so if we invest this amount of money to incorporate the new technology, is it worth it? So have you seen this type of response in your study or in your daily work interacting with employers, and how would you respond to that?
Dude, that's a very good question. If you go back to ROI studies, just with a simple scissor lift or the vacuum lift, if you go to Puget Sound chapter, there is a Department of Labor and Industries of Washington State developed a ROI calculator. Okay, they looked at the workers' comp data and say, for example, if you buy a scissor lift for, say, for a month, $700, and they compare what are the return on investment. Okay, so you have that ROI calculator. With the emerging technology, the closest I could see is Ontario province in Canada. They kind of spinned off that particular Department of Labor and Industries, the Washington calculator. They developed their own calculator with their own provincial workers' comp data, and they related that to the ROIs. Okay, so I'm not sure whether they use the emerging technology, but what I'm trying to say is, for example, you put certain amounts, so for example, the app, computer vision app, and see that ROI calculator whether that helps or not. Okay, that is the way I look at it without even giving you the right answer. The reason I'm saying is that we are trying to look that in our lab now. That is, with emerging technology, can we do a ROI calculations? Okay, so that's actually, we are not yet started the project, but if you're looking at, say, for example, there are ROI calculators, there are. Having said that, Shu, if you ask use cases from these industries, say, for example, computer vision tool, again, I'm not saying, I don't want to name the name and then, I'll be in trouble. So there are, as you know, there are so many computer vision tools, right? They send their use cases. So the question is, are they biased in terms of maybe? Because they say that, oh, if you use my technology, if you use my Tumike, if you use my Inseer, if you use, what a sorter, whatever those technologies are, okay, this is how your return on investment, you can convince your leadership. Nothing wrong with it, because they're trying to, end of the day, they're trying to, trying to establish their own, space in terms of the technology space, in terms of addressing these risks. But at least to my knowledge, Ontario province is a pretty good calculator. Most recent one, the Washington State calculator, which is an old one, but still pretty good. So it's a freely available. If you type, ROI calculator ergonomics, it will come on the, and look at the, this Excel spreadsheet, whereas Ontario province, they kind of made it more very user-friendly in terms of the software. So sorry, I didn't answer your question, Shu.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, thank you for your insight. The other question I have is probably related to how workers perceive those technology, particularly for those technologies, they may perceive it as a intrusion to their privacy. For example, computer vision. So when we talk about computer vision, it's inevitable that we are going to put a camera close to their body in order to track their motion. And they may feel that the employer, they want to track their performance. They want to know what hours they're doing all the time. So I see that in one of your slides, you show that not less than 50% of the employees, they feel that this is a concern, which really surprised me, because when we talk with some of our participants, the majority of them, they feel this is a concern. So
they feel the concern, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So So I don't know how would you convince employees that we're not using those cameras to track your performance? This is a camera which going to be good for your safety, for your health.
Sure, it's $1 million question. If you look at some of the studies came from California state, there's it's a labor report I can even send you. The policing is a huge issue. Police, they always feel that, somebody is overlooking at, my work. So it's very tough, unless that's what I'm saying. You need to convince that this is for your productivity. Like in the sense you can say, well, but still productivity. How many times you're putting the keyboard? How many times are you typing? If I keep on watching all this, then definitely that's a huge issue, right?
Yep.
So that's the biggest one. So you need to include, that's the reason the participatory approach where make sure, sorry, I think I was typing and it came up in that stuff. I apologize. But what I'm saying is, you need to when you are buying some technology, bring them. That's what I'm trying to say in participatory approach. Bring them into the conversation. Make them, okay, if you use this technology, exoskeletons, what do you call the AI tool, okay, this is for your own, yes, by using this technology, your risk is going to go down. So that's what we are looking at, nothing else. And you have not only the data privacy issues, but also how you're using data. Only say shoe looks at the data, not the whole CEO of the the industry or stuff. So, and also guarantee that we are not using it to the detriment of your employment. So these things are the most toughest ones. I go to a lot of worker related industries for talks, and this is the huge concern. And they don't feel comfortable. The only way is to bring them in part of the conversation. It all looks very, wow, of course we have to bring them, but how best you can convince them that, okay, this is a good tool, not to, that's a huge challenge for us as a profession.
All right.
Or
Any other?
if anyone has questions, please email me. So I have that email, and I'm sure you guys put this on YouTube as well. So again, thank you. Thank you, IEA. Thank you, MSD group. Thank you, Shu. Thank you, Erwin. Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you, Ram.
Yes, sir.
And again, this will be on YouTube on the TC's and IEA's website.
Okay.
So for those who were unable to attend today, they can have a look over there.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot.
Oh yeah. So let's just thank our speaker one more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shu. Thank you very much. Take care, guys. Take care.
Okay. Thank you.